Chapter 17. Environment Mood Disorders. The morning light filters weakly through heavy curtains, barely illuminating a room that has become both refuge and prison. On days when depression descends like a thick fog, even the most thoughtfully designed environments can feel hostile or indifferent, while spaces that once provided comfort may suddenly amplify the very symptoms they were meant to soothe. Yet within this challenge lies profound opportunity. For those who struggle with mood disorders, conscious environmental design becomes not luxury, but essential medicine, offering pathways to stability and healing that complement clinical treatment while honoring the unique sensitivities that often accompany these conditions. The relationship between environment and mood disorders reveals itself as both complexity and gift. Complexity because emotional dysregulation can alter perception of environmental influences, making beneficial elements feel overwhelming or comforting spaces seem threatening. Gift, because this heightened sensitivity, when understood and skillfully navigated, can become a doorway to environmental awareness that supports not just symptom management, but genuine flourishing. Research in environmental psychology consistently demonstrates that while environment cannot cure mood disorders, thoughtful environmental modifications can significantly influence symptom severity, recovery speed, and overall quality of life for those navigating depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and related conditions. These environmental interventions work most powerfully when integrated with professional treatment, creating comprehensive approaches that address both the neurochemical and environmental factors that influence mood regulation. This chapter explores the intricate relationships between environmental factors and mood disorders, examining how different conditions create specific environmental sensitivities, discovering evidence-based strategies for creating supportive spaces, and understanding how environmental awareness can become a valuable tool in the broader journey toward psychological wellness and resilience. The goal isn't to replace professional mental health treatment with environmental modifications, but rather to recognize environment as a crucial partner in healing, one that operates continuously in the background of experience, either supporting or hindering the nervous system's natural capacity for regulation and restoration. Environmental sensitivity and mood disorders. Individuals with mood disorders often experience what researchers call environmental hypersensitivity, heightened responsiveness to environmental stimuli that can either trigger symptoms or provide unusually powerful therapeutic benefits when environmental conditions align with neurological needs. The neurobiology of environmental sensitivity. Mood disorders involve alterations in brain systems that regulate not only emotion, but also sensory processing, attention, and environmental perception. These neurological changes can transform ordinary environmental stimuli into either potent stressors or powerful healing influences, depending on both the specific environmental qualities and the individual's current neurochemical state. Research published in the journal Biological Psychiatry reveals that individuals with depression show altered activity in brain regions responsible for processing environmental rewards and threats. Studies from Dr. Ian Gottlieb's laboratory at Stanford University demonstrate that depression correlates with increased activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, while showing decreased activity in regions like the anterior cingulate cortex that normally regulate emotional responses to environmental stimuli. Drevets et al., 2008. These neurological patterns help explain why people with depression may experience ordinary environmental elements as more threatening or overwhelming than those without mood disorders, while simultaneously showing reduced responsiveness to potentially rewarding environmental stimuli that might normally provide pleasure or motivation. The default mode network, brain regions active during rest and introspection, shows characteristic alterations in mood disorders that influence how environmental information gets processed and integrated. Research by Dr. Marcus Reichel and colleagues, 2001, reveals that depression often involves hyperactivity in default mode regions associated with rumination and self-criticism, creating internal mental environments that can overshadow or distort perception of external environmental conditions. This neurological reality means that environmental interventions for mood disorders require particular sensitivity to individual differences in environmental processing, while recognizing that the same environmental elements may affect people differently depending on their current neurochemical state and symptom severity. Circadian system dysregulation represents another crucial neurobiological factor linking environment and mood disorders. Research consistently demonstrates that mood disorders often involve disruptions to circadian rhythms that regulate sleep-wake cycles, hormone production, and daily fluctuations in mood and energy. Studies by Dr. Kathleen Marikangas and colleagues at the National Institute of Mental Health suggest that a substantial proportion of individuals with mood disorders, approximately 40 to 60%, experience some form of circadian disruption, including altered sleep patterns, seasonal mood variations, and irregular daily rhythms of energy and concentration. Marikangas et al. 2011. These disruptions create particular sensitivity to environmental factors that influence circadian regulation, including light exposure patterns, temperature cycles, and social rhythms. Understanding these neurobiological foundations helps explain why environmental modifications can provide such significant benefits for mood disorder management. By addressing the environmental factors that either support or disrupt the brain systems involved in emotional regulation and circadian function. Individual variation in environmental response. While research identifies general patterns linking environment and mood disorders, individual responses to specific environmental modifications vary significantly based on factors including genetics, personal history, current symptoms, medication effects, and co-occurring conditions that influence environmental sensitivity. Genetic factors influence environmental sensitivity through variations in genes affecting neurotransmitter processing, circadian function, and stress response systems. Research published in journals such as Nature Neuroscience has identified genetic variants that appear to influence sensitivity to light therapy, seasonal mood changes, and environmental stress responses, suggesting that optimal environmental interventions may need to be tailored based on individual biological vulnerabilities and strengths. Veritol 2001. The serotonin transporter gene polymorphism, for example, influences both depression risk and environmental sensitivity. Individuals with certain variants of this gene show greater susceptibility to depression following environmental stressors, but also demonstrate enhanced benefits from positive environmental interventions, including nature exposure and light therapy. Caspi et al. 2003. Trauma history significantly influences environmental perception and response patterns through its effects on nervous system regulation and threat detection systems. Research in trauma psychology reveals that individuals with trauma histories often experience heightened sensitivity to environmental stimuli that might trigger trauma memories or activate defensive responses, while simultaneously showing powerful responsiveness to environmental elements that signal safety and restoration. Dr. Herr. Bessel-van-der-Kolk's research on trauma and the body, as detailed in his work The Body Keeps the Score, 2014, demonstrates that environmental modifications addressing safety, predictability, and sensory regulation can provide particularly significant benefits for individuals whose mood disorders involve trauma components. These environmental considerations become crucial for creating spaces that support rather than inadvertently trigger traumatic stress responses. Current medication effects can significantly influence environmental sensitivity and optimal environmental modifications. Many psychiatric medications affect sensory processing, circadian rhythms, and environmental reward sensitivity in ways that may require adjustments to environmental interventions as medication regimens change. For example, some antidepressants can increase photosensitivity, making bright light therapy less comfortable while potentially requiring modifications to optimal lighting conditions. Other medications may affect temperature regulation, sleep patterns, or cognitive processing in ways that influence which environmental modifications provide the greatest benefits. Creating responsive environmental approaches. Given this individual variation, effective environmental interventions for mood disorders require what researchers call responsive environmental design, approaches that can be adjusted based on changing symptoms, varying sensitivities, and evolving treatment needs, rather than fixed environmental prescriptions that ignore individual differences. Graduated environmental modification recognizes that individuals with mood disorders may need to introduce environmental changes slowly and systematically to prevent overwhelming already sensitive nervous systems, while allowing time to assess individual responses to specific modifications. Begin environmental modifications with small, reversible changes that can be easily adjusted based on your response. Perhaps starting with brief morning light exposure rather than extended light therapy sessions, introducing single plants rather than comprehensive indoor ecosystems, or making modest acoustic adjustments rather than major soundscape modifications. This graduated approach allows you to identify which specific environmental elements provide benefits for your particular symptoms and sensitivities, while avoiding the potential overwhelm that can occur when too many environmental changes are introduced simultaneously. Flexibility and adaptability become crucial considerations in environmental design for mood disorders. because symptom patterns often fluctuate significantly, creating varying environmental needs throughout different phases of illness and recovery. Design environmental systems that can be easily modified based on changing needs. Lighting that can be adjusted for different intensities and color temperatures. Acoustic environments that can shift between stimulating and calming qualities. Spaces that can be reconfigured to support either social connection or solitary restoration, depending on current psychological state. Symptom-responsive environmental protocols involve developing conscious awareness of how different environmental conditions affect your specific mood symptoms, allowing you to make environmental adjustments that support stability and recovery based on your current psychological state, rather than rigid adherence to general recommendations. Depression and anxiety, supportive environments. Depression and anxiety, while distinct conditions, often co-occur and create overlapping environmental sensitivities that require thoughtful environmental approaches addressing both the energy depletion characteristic of depression and the hypervigilance typical of anxiety disorders. Environmental factors in depression. Depression involves complex alterations in brain systems regulating motivation, pleasure, energy, and circadian rhythms that create specific environmental vulnerabilities while also creating opportunities for environmental interventions that can support symptom management and recovery processes. Light and circadian regulation represent perhaps the most thoroughly researched environmental intervention for depression, with extensive evidence supporting the therapeutic benefits of strategic light exposure for both seasonal and non-seasonal depression. Research published in the American Journal of Psychiatry demonstrates that light therapy using 10,000 lux broad-spectrum light for 30 minutes each morning can provide antidepressant effects comparable to medication for many individuals with seasonal affective disorder, while also showing benefits for non-seasonal depression when used as part of comprehensive treatment approaches. Lam et al., 2006. The mechanism involves light's effects on circadian rhythm regulation, serotonin production, and the suppression of daytime melatonin that can contribute to depression symptoms. Morning light exposure helps establish healthy circadian rhythms while supporting neurotransmitter systems involved in mood regulation. Implement strategic light therapy practices. Expose yourself to bright light, ideally natural sunlight or specialized light therapy devices, for 20-30 minutes within the first hour of waking. Position your primary living and working areas to maximize natural light exposure throughout the day, and consider gradual light reduction in evening hours to support healthy sleep-wake cycles. Nature exposure provides particularly significant benefits for depression through multiple mechanisms, including attention restoration, stress hormone reduction, and what researchers call behavioral activation, increased engagement in meaningful activities that can counter the withdrawal and isolation typical of depressive episodes. Studies published in Environmental Science Technology reveal that even brief nature exposure, as little as 5 minutes in green spaces, can provide measurable mood improvements for individuals with depression, while longer nature immersion experiences show more substantial and sustained benefits. Barton Pretty, 2010. The attention restoration theory from Rachel and Stephen Kaplan suggests that natural environments support recovery from the directed attention fatigue that often accompanies depression, while the stress reduction theory proposes that nature exposure reduces cortisol and other stress hormones that can exacerbate depressive symptoms. Kaplan, 1995. Create accessible nature connection practices. Establish daily routines that include some form of nature contact, whether through brief outdoor time, window views of natural elements, or indoor plants that provide ongoing connection to living systems. The key lies in consistency rather than intensity. Regular brief nature contact often provides greater benefits than occasional longer exposures. Color and aesthetic environments influence depression through their effects on mood, energy, and cognitive processing. Research indicates that individuals with depression often show altered color perception and preference patterns, with potential therapeutic benefits from specific color applications that support rather than exacerbate symptoms. While individual responses vary, research suggests that moderate amounts of warm colors, soft yellows, gentle oranges, may support energy and optimism for some individuals with depression, while cooler colors, soft blues, gentle greens, may provide calming effects without the excessive sedation that might worsen depressive symptoms. Avoid environments dominated by dark colors or harsh contrasts that may contribute to the sense of heaviness or hopelessness that characterizes depression, while also avoiding overly bright or stimulating color schemes that might create agitation or overwhelm for sensitive nervous systems. Anxiety-supportive environmental design. Anxiety disorders involve hyperactivation of threat detection systems that create particular environmental sensitivities, while also creating opportunities for environmental modifications that can support nervous system regulation and reduce anxiety triggers. Predictability and control represent crucial environmental factors for anxiety management because unpredictable environmental changes can trigger anxiety responses, while perceived environmental control can provide significant anxiety reduction even when actual control remains limited. Research published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology demonstrates that environments offering high predictability and user control show significantly lower anxiety levels among occupants compared to environments with unpredictable elements or limited control options. Evans-Cohen, 1987. Create environmental predictability through consistent daily routines that provide structure and familiarity, organized spaces that eliminate the stress of searching for needed items, and environmental systems that respond reliably to your preferences, rather than creating ongoing uncertainty about environmental conditions. Implement environmental control strategies that enhance your sense of agency. Adjustable lighting that you can modify based on current comfort needs, acoustic environments that you can influence through personal sound management tools, and temperature control options that allow adaptation to changing anxiety symptoms that may affect thermal comfort. Sensory regulation becomes particularly crucial for anxiety management because anxiety often involves hypervigilance to environmental stimuli that can create ongoing nervous system activation even when no actual threats exist. Design sensory environments that support rather than overwhelm anxious nervous systems. Acoustic environments that provide gentle masking of potentially startling sounds while maintaining awareness of important environmental information. Lighting that avoids harsh contrasts or sudden changes that might trigger startle responses. And tactile environments that emphasize comfort and security through soft textures and supportive surfaces. Consider implementing what researchers call sensory retreat options. Spaces or elements that provide calming sensory input when anxiety levels become elevated. This might include weighted blankets that provide deep pressure stimulation, essential oils with calming properties, or small water features that provide soothing sound and visual focus. Safety and security. Environmental cues address the hypervigilance characteristic of anxiety disorders by creating environmental conditions that signal safety to nervous systems primed to detect potential threats. Research in environmental psychology reveals that certain environmental elements consistently signal safety across cultures and individuals. Clear sightlines that allow environmental monitoring without requiring hypervigilance. Multiple exit options that prevent feeling trapped. Appropriate boundaries that provide protection without creating claustrophobia. And familiar elements that create comfort through predictable, positive associations. Create environmental safety cues through thoughtful spatial arrangement. Position seating to allow clear views of entrances and exits. Eliminate hidden corners or spaces that might trigger worry about unseen threats. Maintain appropriate lighting that allows clear environmental assessment. And include personal, meaningful objects that provide comfort and positive associations. Integrated approaches for comorbid conditions. When depression and anxiety co-occur, as they do for approximately 60% of individuals with either condition, environmental approaches must address the sometimes conflicting needs of both conditions while creating overall environmental conditions that support stability and recovery. The energy-arousal balance represents a crucial consideration when designing environments for comorbid depression and anxiety, because depression often involves energy depletion while anxiety involves excess arousal, creating needs for environmental conditions that can provide gentle activation without overstimulation. Develop environmental strategies that address both conditions simultaneously. Moderate light levels that provide energy support for depression without creating overstimulation for anxiety. Natural elements that provide both mood elevation and anxiety reduction. And acoustic environments that offer gentle stimulation without triggering anxiety responses. Create environmental flexibility that allows adjustments based on which symptoms predominate at different times. Lighting systems that can shift between energizing and calming qualities, spaces that can be reconfigured to support either activation or rest, and sensory options that can provide either stimulation or soothing based on current needs. Daily rhythm support becomes particularly important for comorbid conditions because both depression and anxiety can disrupt circadian rhythms, while benefiting from environmental cues that support stable daily patterns. Establish environmental routines that provide structure without rigidity, consistent morning light exposure that supports circadian regulation, regular meal times in pleasant environments that support nutrition and routine, and evening environmental transitions that signal rest and recovery without creating pressure about sleep performance. Bipolar disorder and environmental stability. Bipolar disorder creates unique environmental considerations because mood episodes involve dramatic shifts in energy, sensory sensitivity, sleep patterns, and environmental preferences that require flexible yet stable environmental approaches supporting both mood regulation and episode prevention. Environmental triggers and protective factors. Research in bipolar disorder consistently identifies environmental factors that can either trigger mood episodes or provide protective stability, with particular emphasis on circadian regulation, sensory input management, and environmental change patterns that can influence mood stability. Circadian rhythm stability represents perhaps the most crucial environmental factor in bipolar disorder management, because disruptions to sleep-wake cycles can trigger both manic and depressive episodes. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry demonstrates that consistent sleep-wake timing and appropriate light exposure patterns significantly reduce episode frequency and severity. Frank et al., 2005. Dr. Ellen Frank's interpersonal and social rhythm therapy research reveals that individuals with bipolar disorder benefit significantly from consistent daily routines, including regular sleep and wake times, consistent meal timing, and stable patterns of light exposure and physical activity that support circadian stability. Frank et al., 2005. Implement circadian stability practices. Maintain consistent sleep and wake times even on weekends and during mood episodes when possible. Ensure adequate morning light exposure to support circadian entrainment. Minimize evening light exposure that might disrupt sleep onset. And create environmental cues that support regular daily rhythms, including consistent meal times and activity patterns. Sensory input regulation becomes particularly crucial during different mood episodes because mania often involves hypersensitivity to environmental stimuli, while depression may involve either reduced environmental responsiveness or increased sensitivity to overwhelming environmental conditions. During manic episodes, environmental modifications should emphasize calming and regulating influences. Reduced visual stimulation through simplified environments, acoustic calm through noise reduction and soothing soundscapes, and gentle sensory input through comfortable temperatures and soft textures that provide grounding without overstimulation. During depressive episodes, environmental approaches may need to provide gentle activation and sensory engagement. Appropriate light levels that support energy without creating overwhelm, nature contact that provides motivation and connection, and environmental beauty that can provide inspiration and hope during difficult periods. Environmental change management addresses the reality that individuals with bipolar disorder often show heightened sensitivity to environmental disruptions that might trigger mood episodes, while also needing environmental flexibility to accommodate changing needs during different mood states. Minimize unnecessary environmental changes during vulnerable periods while maintaining flexibility for helpful environmental modifications. This might involve keeping core environmental elements stable, lighting patterns, sleep environment, primary living areas, while allowing modifications to less essential elements, decoration, music, aromatherapy, that can be adjusted to support current mood state without disrupting overall environmental stability. Creating mood-responsive environments. Effective environments for bipolar disorder require what researchers call adaptive stability, environmental conditions that remain fundamentally stable and predictable while offering flexibility to accommodate the varying needs that arise during different mood states. Episode-specific environmental protocols involve developing environmental modification strategies that can be implemented during early signs of mood episodes to support stability and potentially reduce episode severity. Early mania environmental protocols might include reducing stimulating environmental elements, dimming lights to reduce overstimulation, simplifying visual environments to reduce distraction, implementing calming soundscapes to support nervous system regulation, and ensuring comfortable temperatures that don't contribute to agitation or discomfort. Early depression environmental protocols might emphasize gentle activation, gradually increasing light exposure to support energy and circadian regulation, adding natural elements that provide hope and connection, creating environmental beauty through flowers or inspiring images, and ensuring adequate warmth and comfort that support basic self-care activities. Environmental monitoring systems help track relationships between environmental factors and mood changes, providing valuable information for preventing episodes and optimizing environmental modifications for individual response patterns. Develop personal environmental awareness practices. Notice how different environmental conditions affect your energy, sleep, and mood stability. Track patterns between environmental changes and mood fluctuations. Identify specific environmental elements that consistently support stability versus those that seem to correlate with mood destabilization. This monitoring can reveal individual environmental triggers and protective factors that may not match general research findings, providing personalized information for creating optimal environmental conditions for your specific bipolar disorder pattern. Support system environmental considerations recognize that bipolar disorder often affects not just individuals but their families and social networks, requiring environmental approaches that support both personal stability and healthy relationships during different mood episodes. Create environmental systems that support both personal needs and relationship maintenance. Spaces that can accommodate social interaction during stable periods while providing retreat options during vulnerable times. Environmental communication systems that help others understand your current environmental needs, and shared environmental protocols that family members or partners can help implement during episodes when self-care becomes challenging. Seasonal considerations for bipolar disorder. Seasonal patterns significantly influence bipolar disorder for many individuals, with research indicating that seasonal changes in light exposure, temperature, and daily rhythm patterns can trigger mood episodes while also providing opportunities for preventive environmental interventions. Seasonal affective pattern management addresses the reality that many individuals with bipolar disorder experience predictable seasonal mood patterns that require proactive environmental modifications to prevent episodes rather than reactive interventions after episodes begin. Fall and winter protocols often emphasize circadian support through increased light exposure, light therapy during shorter daylight periods, maximizing available natural light through window positioning and outdoor time, creating warm and cozy environments that provide comfort during cold weather, and maintaining social connection during seasons when isolation becomes more likely. Spring and summer protocols may focus on preventing mania triggers, moderating light exposure during longer daylight periods, maintaining consistent sleep schedules despite changing daylight patterns, creating cooling environments during hot weather that might contribute to agitation, and managing increased social and activity opportunities that might disrupt stability routines. Geographic and climate considerations acknowledge that different geographic locations and climate patterns can significantly influence bipolar disorder stability, with some individuals finding particular benefit from specific climate conditions, while others may need to adapt environmental strategies based on their location. Research suggests that extreme climate conditions, whether very hot, very cold, very humid, or very dry, can influence mood stability for some individuals with bipolar disorder. Understanding your personal climate sensitivity allows environmental adaptations that support stability within whatever geographic constraints exist. If relocation remains possible, consider climate factors as part of comprehensive treatment planning, recognizing that environmental factors alone shouldn't determine geographic decisions, but can be valuable considerations alongside social support, healthcare access, and personal preferences. Personal scenarios of environmental healing. Understanding how environmental modifications translate into real-world applications for mood disorder management becomes clearest through examining specific scenarios that illustrate how individuals have successfully integrated environmental awareness into their mental health recovery and maintenance strategies. Depression recovery through environmental transformation. Sarah's depression had persisted for several months when she began noticing how certain environments consistently affected her energy and motivation levels. Working with her therapist, she developed what they called an environmental recovery protocol that addressed multiple aspects of her living environment while supporting her therapy and medication treatment. Light therapy integration became Sarah's foundation practice. She invested in a 10,000 lux light therapy device and created a morning routine that combined light exposure with gentle activities that felt manageable during depression, drinking coffee while using the light box, reading inspiring poetry, or simply sitting quietly and allowing the light to support her circadian regulation. Rather than viewing light therapy as another burden, Sarah learned to make it pleasant by pairing it with activities she found comforting. This approach helped her maintain consistency even during periods when motivation remained low. Nature connection practices evolved gradually from Sarah's recognition that her few moments of relief from depression consistently occurred during brief outdoor walks. She began systematically incorporating nature contact into daily routines, eating lunch outdoors when weather permitted, taking phone calls while walking in nearby parks, and positioning her workspace near a window with tree views. During winter months, when outdoor time became more challenging, Sarah created indoor nature connections through plants that thrived in low-light conditions, nature sound recordings during work activities, and high-quality nature photography that she rotated seasonally to maintain visual connection to natural cycles. Color and aesthetic modifications addressed Sarah's observation that her home environment had gradually become dark and cluttered during depression onset. Working slowly to avoid overwhelming herself, she made small changes that increased environmental warmth and brightness. Replacing heavy curtains with lighter window treatments, adding warm-colored throw pillows and blankets, organizing spaces to reduce visual chaos that contributed to mental overwhelm. These aesthetic changes weren't about creating perfect spaces, but about removing environmental barriers to basic self-care, while adding elements that provided gentle inspiration and comfort during difficult periods. Social environmental considerations recognized that depression had led Sarah to isolate in ways that were reinforced by environmental conditions that discouraged social connection. She modified her living space to make social interaction feel more appealing, creating comfortable seating arrangements that could accommodate friends, keeping her kitchen organized enough to allow casual meal sharing, and establishing environmental routines that made it easier to maintain social connections even during depressive periods. Anxiety management through environmental control. Michael's anxiety disorder involved persistent worry and physical tension that seemed to worsen in certain environmental conditions while improving dramatically in others. Through careful observation and experimentation, he developed environmental modification strategies that significantly reduced his daily anxiety levels while supporting his therapy progress. Sensory regulation became Michael's primary environmental focus after recognizing that unexpected sounds, harsh lighting, and temperature fluctuations consistently triggered anxiety responses. He created what he called sensory safety protocols that addressed his most significant environmental triggers. Acoustic management involved identifying the specific sounds that consistently provoked anxiety while finding sound environments that supported calm. Michael invested in noise-canceling headphones for unpredictable acoustic environments, created playlists of nature sounds for focus and relaxation, and worked with his landlord to address particularly problematic noise sources in his apartment building. He also learned to use positive sound strategically, playing gentle music during anxiety-provoking activities like cleaning or bill paying, using nature sound recordings during work periods that required sustained concentration, and developing bedtime sound routines that supported sleep despite anxiety's tendency to create racing thoughts. Lighting modifications addressed Michael's discovery that harsh fluorescent lighting consistently increased his sense of agitation, while warm, adjustable lighting helped him feel more grounded and secure. He replaced overhead fluorescent bulbs with full-spectrum LED alternatives, added multiple lamps that allowed lighting adjustment throughout the day, and invested in smart bulbs that could automatically adjust color temperature to support his circadian rhythms. Control and predictability systems helped Michael manage anxiety through environmental modifications that increased his sense of agency and reduced uncertainty that fueled anxious thoughts. He organized his living space to eliminate daily decision-making about basic necessities, establishing consistent locations for keys, wallet, and other essential items, creating weekly meal planning and preparation routines, and developing environmental systems that supported consistent daily rhythms. These organizational changes weren't about perfectionism, but about reducing the cognitive load and decision fatigue that could trigger anxiety while creating environmental conditions that supported rather than hindered basic self-care activities. Safety and security modifications addressed Michael's hypervigilance tendencies through environmental changes that helped his nervous system recognize genuine safety rather than maintaining constant alert states. He rearranged furniture to provide clear sight lines to entrances and exits, improved lighting in previously dark corners that triggered worry, and created environmental transition rituals that helped him shift from public vigilance to private relaxation when returning home. Bipolar stability through environmental routine. Lisa's bipolar disorder recovery involved learning to create environmental stability that could support her during both manic and depressive episodes, while remaining flexible enough to accommodate the different needs that arose during various mood states. Circadian stability protocols became Lisa's foundation for environmental mood regulation. Working with her psychiatrist, she developed environmental routines that supported consistent sleep-wake cycles regardless of mood episode severity. Blackout curtains that allowed sleep during manic periods when overstimulation could prevent rest. Sunrise alarm clocks that provided gentle wake-up support during depressive periods when getting out of bed felt overwhelming. And light therapy protocols that could be adjusted based on seasonal needs and current mood state. Environmental monitoring systems helped Lisa track relationships between environmental factors and mood changes, providing valuable information for episode prevention and environmental optimization. She developed simple tracking practices that noted connections between environmental conditions and energy levels, sleep quality, and overall mood stability. This tracking revealed personal patterns that didn't always match general bipolar disorder recommendations. Lisa discovered that moderate amounts of visual stimulation actually supported her stability better than minimalist environments, while certain color combinations consistently correlated with mood destabilization regardless of episode type. Episode-responsive environmental modifications allowed Lisa to adjust her environment based on early mood change signs while maintaining overall environmental stability. During early manic signs, she could quickly reduce environmental stimulation, dimming lights, switching to calming music, and removing visually complex elements from her immediate environment. During early depression signs, she could add gentle environmental activation, increasing light levels, adding fresh flowers or plants, and creating environmental beauty that provided hope and inspiration. Support system integration recognized that Lisa's environmental needs affected her relationships and required family understanding and cooperation. She educated her partner about environmental modifications that supported her stability, created shared protocols for environmental adjustments during episodes, and developed communication systems that allowed her to request environmental support when self-advocacy became difficult during mood episodes. These personal scenarios illustrate that environmental healing for mood disorders rarely involves dramatic transformations, but rather emerges through accumulated small changes that honor individual sensitivities while supporting the nervous system's natural capacity for regulation and restoration. The most effective environmental approaches work in partnership with professional treatment, creating comprehensive support systems that address both the neurochemical and environmental factors that influence mood stability and recovery. Through conscious environmental attention, individuals with mood disorders can develop what might be called environmental self-advocacy, the ability to recognize and create environmental conditions that support their unique neurological needs while building resilience and agency in their healing journey. This environmental awareness becomes not just symptom management strategy, but pathway to deeper understanding of the intimate connections between inner and outer landscapes that shape all human psychological experience.